Hi, everyone. Thank you for attending my presentation, Seeing Further, Closing Knowledge Gaps and Improving Sustainability Along the Aquaculture Feed Supply Chain. My name is Angelo Pablo, and I'm a second-year master's student in the Coastal Science and Policy program here at the University of California, Santa Cruz. Now, before we get started, I want to briefly talk about my journey before coming to the CSP program. During the peak pandemic in 2020, I worked for a small startup aquaponics company that collected the fecal matter of Nile tilapia to use as a fertilizer for plants. This is where I started to get an interest in working with finfish. So in 2021, I made the big decision to move to Big Island, Hawaii to become a hatchery technician at Blue Ocean Mariculture, the only commercial open ocean finfish cultivation facility in the US. This gave me the opportunity to get hands-on hatchery experience caring and raising for native Hawaiian kampachi, as you can see here in the bottom left corner. And from my experiences, I saw the value and potential that the commercial aquaculture industry had. As someone who loves seafood, I wanted to pursue my education further through the CSP program to understand two things: how aquaculture can sustainably support food systems, and what was preventing the expansion of operations in the US. Even till now, there's a growing seafood demand. And according to the Food and Agricultural Organization, aquaculture is one of the fastest growing food production sectors in the world, producing around 40 million tons to over 120 million tons of seafood in just 20 years. And the trend is still increasing. So clearly, there's a need for aquaculture to support the growing seafood demand, but it must be done sustainably. And there are many parts of the industry that can and must be improved upon. Now, when it comes to commercial finfish aquaculture, there are several key issues that come to mind, especially when it comes to environmental impacts. There are potential fish escapes, the potential introduction of disease, and the effects on water pollution and eutrophication potential. And so I decided to tackle this by honing in on aquaculture feeds, also known as aquafeeds, because they contribute to about 90% of environmental impacts. They're the most expensive resource when it comes to fed aquaculture operations, and they play a major role in affecting the biological and economic aspects when raising finfish. So looking at the growth, nutrition, health, taste, texture, and color. And I find aquafeeds really interesting. A question that always comes up in my mind is, what do we feed finfish to then feed ourselves? So during my first year, I spoke to nearly 100 different individuals in the industry, spanning academia, non-governmental organizations, private businesses, government, and policy. And there were four recurring themes on major pain points about aquafeeds. The first was traceability. Where are the ingredients coming from to make these feeds, and are they being sourced sustainably? What feed practices are being used in farms to ensure that there are minimal impacts to the surrounding environment? Next is scalability. Now, aquafeeds contain fish meal and fish oil, which are essential ingredients obtained from wild forage fish populations like anchovies and sardines, and they provide essential nutrients for proper growth. However, as the commercial finfish aquaculture industry continues to scale up, more resources like fish meal and fish oil will be needed to produce feeds, but this is not going to cut it. Fish meal and fish oil is used a lot in producing pet feeds and vitamin supplements, so the demand and competition are already pretty high. So we need to look at other alternative ingredients that are scalable, like algae oil, insect meal, and other protein sources to offset the growing pressure on wild fish populations. Now, for policy and permitting, the permitting process to even establish offshore aquaculture operations, especially in the US, is long and expensive. And within this, regulations from the Food and Drug Administration, the US Department of Agriculture, and other regulatory agencies will need to be followed if aquaculture operations want to use existing feeds or alternative ingredients for commercial purposes. Lastly, the social license. The general public does not have a solid grasp on what aquaculture is. In my personal life, outside of conservation and aquaculture, many of my friends still don't really know the difference between fisheries and aquaculture, where the way I personally see it, fisheries is the management of existing wild aquatic species populations that include finfish, and aquaculture is the raising of aquatic species. So there's more of that human element involved. Also, many don't realize that in the US, about 80% of our seafood is imported, and half of that is farmed. So with the lack of accurate information about aquafeeds and feeding practices, the public will continue to have misconceptions about producing our own sustainable seafood in US waters. And so while trying to figure out a capstone partner, I had these key pain points in mind, and I was wondering, what's a project that I can work on that can address one or several of these key pain points? That's when I had the chance to speak with Dr. Dave Robb, who is the program lead of the Sea Further Sustainability Program at Cargill Aqua Nutrition, also known as CQN. He expressed that there was an increase in farm customer demand for carbon emissions reporting of feeds, a goal of focusing on feed optimization, and a need to incorporate the program into the CQN North America system and reach out to more US-based companies. Now that's when my mind clicked, and I found the golden opportunity to co-develop my capstone with one of the largest global aquafeed manufacturers to begin turning these goals into a reality. So what is the Sea Further Sustainability Program? It's an initiative that started around 4 years ago, and its goal is to work with supply chain partners, especially farm customers, to reduce their carbon emissions by 30% by 2030. The program utilizes life cycle assessment, or LCA, as a way to provide quantitative results of the carbon emissions of CQN North America's aquafeeds. LCA shows the life cycle of a product, in this case, from the ingredient sourcing all the way to when the feed is made and then sold to farm customers. And it portrays the various environmental impacts that a given product has. So in an LCA, there are several key elements, one being a system boundary, so the scope of the program. And in this case, it's everything from feed manufacturers or raw material suppliers to feed manufacturers to aquaculture farms. And there's also a functional unit, which essentially provides a basis for comparison. In this case, we're looking at how much kilogram of feed is used to produce 1 kilogram of fish. We use this information later on to then calculate the total amount of CO2 emitted. There's also an inventory database of the various extractions and emissions that are within the system boundary. And then there's the assessment and interpretation of impacts throughout the entire process. And for this program, we're really focused on the global warming potential. And in this case, we're then looking at the kilograms of CO2 emitted. And that's where my capstone project really comes in. So I want to note that I've included these icons later in my slides on the bottom left corner to help you identify what each part of my work applies to along the supply chain. So my goal with my capstone project was to advance Cargill Aqua Nutrition's greenhouse gas mitigation efforts by implementing the Sea Further Sustainability Program in North America. I want to emphasize that my capstone project is the spark that began that process of applying this carbon emissions reporting initiative in CQN North America's system for the very first time. So I had to start with getting a solid grasp of the foundations of the program over the summer of 2023. And after, I began my first objective of identifying key players within CQN, attempting to fill in data gaps with primary data, so that's information collected directly from supply chain partners, and creating a process framework on how to extract and analyze data from different databases. The key idea to get here is that the largest data gaps are really present at the raw material supplier and aquaculture farm levels. CQN North America themselves are the feed manufacturers, so it's relatively easy to obtain the necessary information from their processes. And the current approach is to have members from CQN reach out to raw material suppliers and farm customers by sending out questionnaires that contain information that we need. So this is a small section of the raw material sourcing spreadsheet that we use that asks for information like the Cargill mill and the country it's located in, the ingredient name, the supplier name, the country in which the ingredient was produced, as well as the amount received in kilograms. And this is the farm input questionnaire that is sent to farm customers. Again, this is a small section of that, asking for different types of information such as fish inputs in kilograms, the various types of feeds used in tons per year, and the amount of fish harvested in tons per year. Next, I created quarterly and annual carbon emissions reports for several of CQN North America's customers. This objective would allow us to identify key areas along the supply chain that had the highest carbon emissions and identify reduction recommendations that can be made. However, due to limited data capabilities, Current interventions and recommendations for North America can only really be made at the feed manufacturing level, but this is still a valuable first step. This is an annual carbon emissions report that I generated for a specific feed type. And to ensure that farm customers achieve their 30% reduction goal by 2030, Cargill works with each of their farm customers to generate a specific carbon emissions target, as shown here in green. And following that are the actual carbon emissions of the total feeds that are purchased each fiscal quarter. So we are currently obtaining and reporting values 4 times a year. While this is only 1 year's worth of data, this establishes a process to consistently calculate and visualize that data and identify trends that can lead to decisions on reducing the customer's environmental impacts moving forward. And I'm currently in the process of analyzing metadata from 2019 to 2021 for one of CQN North America's customers. So I'm excited to see if there are any trends. I also visualized the top 10 highest emitting ingredients based off of carbon emissions percentage for each quarter. This will allow CQN North America to identify which ingredients contribute most to carbon emissions and can help map out where alternative ingredients can potentially come in to create feeds that emit less. But there's a delicate balance because in addition to sustainability, you also need to be able to maintain the quality of the fish. So I referred to those biological and economic factors previously on taste, texture, color, health, growth, and nutrition. And for this specific feed type, the top 3 highest emitting ingredients were animal proteins, such as poultry meal, vegetable oil, such as canola oil, and forage fish meal. Lastly, I assessed areas of improvement and opportunity for the program. After about 11 months of learning and working on this initiative, I created a tutorial that provides the details on the methodologies and approaches in integrating the program into the CQN North America system. I also included a report summarizing key points of consideration and logistics recommendations moving forward. Additionally, while my work on this program has also allowed me to assist CQN North America on a feed standard certification project, where I compiled various processor information, marine ingredients, and other information, as shown here. And I organized the sustainability of each marine finfish species being used based off of specific categories. So this table on the right is taken from a specific feed certification group with 4 categories from 1 to 4, and 4 being the most sustainable. And the key takeaway here is that certification groups such as the Aquaculture Stewardship Council have strict conditions that need to be followed on a consistent basis in order to obtain and maintain certification status. I conducted this exercise and provided an overall sustainability score for CQN North America's marine ingredient use for 2023. So this program, while relatively new, takes an approach to assessing carbon emissions while adhering to standards such as the Greenhouse Gas Protocol and the Science-Based Target Initiative. This program first started in Norway, and my Capstone project has carried it over to North America. While different country teams may be dealing with different companies and reporting formats, this serves as a valuable opportunity to cross-collaborate with each other, to share information, and make sure that everyone is on the same page with at least the methods involved in calculating emissions. Next, my project has given CQN North America a model and proof of concept that can be followed to report emissions through the See Further sustainability program. To continue improving the accuracy of carbon emissions reporting, more primary data must be collected from supply chain partners and replace secondary data where possible. And secondary data is information from a database, so the values may not be as accurate, but it's still better than nothing. Lastly, industry parties, so fish farms, feed mills, and feed ingredient suppliers, perceive this program in one of 3 ways. They see the value and are willing to contribute. They see the potential benefits of the program, but still don't have a full understanding of why it's important. And then there are those who don't understand the program or the work at all. Therefore, they don't see it as a priority and are not willing to contribute. We need to identify approaches to addressing the 2 latter groups to help improve the resilience of the aquaculture industry. For example, we can consider several market strategies, like explaining how this work helps in attaining certifications that are highly sought after, or highlighting the value of corporate, social, and environmental responsibility. So hosting farm tours, establishing collaborations with academia, culinary tourism opportunities, or working with local producer clubs. So for my next steps, I will continue working on the program. I'm currently working with 3 farm customers, and 2 others are joining in on this initiative soon. I hope to get the chance to continue to reach out to more US-based companies, continue to obtain primary data, look into ways these recommendations can be applied upstream to raw material suppliers, and identify ways to encourage supply chain partners to adopt these recommendations. I'm also going to continue advocating for responsible, equitable, science-based aquaculture practices, whether it be through aquaculture or climate conferences, lobbying on the Hill and sharing my experiences, or reaching out to social media influencers or chefs who share a passion for sustainable food systems and want to help educate and inform the public. I also want to uplift youth voices in my efforts. I've recently been involved with the Coalition for Sustainable Aquaculture, a partnership of environmental advocates, industry leaders, and award-winning chefs dedicated to growing sustainable aquaculture in US waters. My passion and efforts have allowed me to propose and establish a future leader sector within the coalition, and I've been named one of 6 future leaders across the United States. So there are so many people I want to thank for making my time during the CSP program an enriching experience and who have been extremely supportive. Most notably, Dr. Ann Kapuscinski and Dr. Pablo, my advisors, for putting me under their wing and supporting me through my entire Capstone journey. Dr. Dave Robb, who has been a strong advocate and mentor of my work and has shown me the ropes of the See Further initiative. Derek Foster, who I've had the pleasure of working closely with, and without him, a lot of my work would not be possible. And I also want to thank several groups. Of course, the rest of the Cargill Aqua Nutrition team, Taylor Voorhees, who without his introduction, this project would not have existed, Isaac Wan, Kim Hetland, Christopher, Denise, Kyle, and so many others. The Blue Pioneers Accelerator program for their support and for giving me the opportunity to connect with a global network of innovators and ecopreneurs. The Coalition for Sustainable Aquaculture for their support and for uplifting youth voices in the aquaculture industry. Big shout out to Kat and Ruth for being such awesome mentors. Blue Ocean Mariculture, my former employer, and especially Dick Jones, the CEO, who's been a great supporter and mentor as I continue to navigate the aquaculture space. And of course, the Coastal Science and Policy Program, faculty and staff, especially Sarah and Holly for their guidance. And of course, my CSP cohort for their always encouraging me and being my biggest supporters. So I want to thank everyone online, especially friends and family, for your time. If you would like to learn more about the CSP program and the work I've been doing, feel free to scan the QR code.